in the live. So your folks, and feel free to go out to well, you on here now. Feel free to go out to LinkedIn if you want to share and let people know you're live.
Okay.
Oh, hey y'all, hey y'all, hey y'all. Hello, hello, hello. I'm gonna give folks time to get in our room today. Y'all know me. I am Jeannine K. Brown. I am the host of the Untoxic Boss. We're going to give folks a little time to get in the room before we start our show. We got a great topic today. We have a great guest. So if you are navigating office, politics, and landmines, because they out there, there's some little landmines out there. There's some rules of engagement. That's what we're talking about today. So get ready for a great, great show. I'm so excited about this topic. Of course, I'm excited about the topic. And of course, I am excited about our guest. And the reason I'm always excited, y'all, is because we really put a lot of thought into these topics and a lot of thought into who our guests are going to be on the show. And we're always looking for new guests. I have some amazing people in my network, so I get a chance to invite them on. But if y'all know some subject matter experts around psychological safety, toxicity in the workplace, leadership, building great teams, professional development and coaching. If you know anybody, feel free to DM us. You can DM me or Maria Faye Barr, who is on our team. She's probably going to drop a link in there if you're interested and you have a topic you want to present to our audience on the show. You can bring those to us as well. So she'll share a link in the chat window soon, and you can share that with your network, and or you can fill it out yourself because you have some lived experiences that I think we can all glean some insights from. Right. So a lot of times we're looking for these experts, right, out in the world, and we're looking for credentials. But so many of you have some amazing lived experiences that you definitely could be a part of this conversation. And so we want to make sure that you are a part of this conversation. All right. So we're going to get right to it. And I cannot wait talk about it. All right. So I am procrastinating a little bit. Those of you who listen to us on the podcast, you'll never hear this part. But I am procrastinating. I'm trying to get y'all in the room. But we got a great guest. So let's not wait any further because she and I are ready for this conversation. So like I said, today on the Untoxic Boss, we are going to be diving into a topic that is so relevant and so timely for every professional across industry, across profession. I don't care if you're an accountant or an engineer, if you are a machine tech or an auto mechanic. If you work in any sort of structured organization of any kind, nonprofit, for-profit, privately held, today's topic is for you. Today, we're going to be talking about navigating office landmines and politics. Office politics. How many of y'all know how tricky this can be? And often unavoidable and an unavoidable part of our day to day in the workplace. And no one is immune from dealing with office politics. I don't care if you're an intern, a new hire staff with less than 3 years of experience, if you are in middle management, a supervisor, a director, vice president, I don't care what kind of fancy title you have. You could be the CEO. You're navigating office politics and landmines. You could be working for the largest company listed on the Fortune 100 list, or you could be working in your own privately held company as an entrepreneur. There is some politics that's going to go down. And the key to office politics is really knowing how to navigate it, understanding where you fit in the matrix of it all. And that's what we want to talk about today. And our guest is going to help us understand what office politics is and what it looks like. We're going to talk about navigating these challenges and ways to foster a healthy, more positive work environment. Because communication is a big part of that. So we're going to talk about that a little bit too, like how to have empowered communication, how to speak up before you're spoken down to, because that was always my thing when I worked in corporate. And what I realized, I worked with some, like all of us, right? We worked sometimes with some really brilliant people. But even brilliant people, we try to flex every once in a while. We try to sometimes show people how smart we are. And it doesn't always land well. Sometimes it comes across as just being mean and nasty, arrogant, or condescending. And then it starts to take on some forms of bullying. Sometimes in the work environment, sometimes it's unintended, but sometimes people know exactly what they are doing. So, how do we set boundaries? And that's one of the things I used to do. I would set boundaries early on and tell people, this is how you're going to talk to me. This is how we're going to engage. Right? Because I think that's a very important part of working in the workplace, setting boundaries earlier. But I don't want to jump too far into our topic because we have an amazing guest who is, y'all, I'm going to tell you, when I met Tia, our guest today, I felt like we had known each other forever. She was like a kindred spirit. And I think all of you are going to feel this way. Not only is she an amazing business owner and a coach, and the reason I want to mention she's a coach before she gives us the real introduction is in an introductory conversation with her, I felt seen and heard. I felt empowered. And, one of my love languages, both in my personal life and in the workplace, is words of affirmation. And so she just filled my cup with her words of affirmation. This is why I think everybody needs a coach, no matter where you are in your career. But that is not the topic today. The topic today is navigating office landmines and office politics, but a coach can help you with that. And so I'm going to call up Coach Tia Buckingham White to the stage. Thank you so much for being here on our show today. Y'all give her a virtual round of applause. And she's a coach, so she likes a good hug too. Come on,
Yes.
Tia, tell the people who you are. Tell them
Yes.
about who you work with and what you do and why today's topic is very apropos for you.
Yes. Oh my gosh, it's so apropos, right? Thank you for having me though, Jeannine. I did meet Jeannine at an amazing event that she does with another colleague or a person we do stuff with that we share, Miss Renee Pierre, and you all did a beautiful job. And I was so taken with her facilitating skills and the way she ran the room. And I just was so impressed with you, Jeannine.
Thank you.
And then the way you bring folks in for conversation and you're so transparent. But thank you for having me today. I do have a human experience management consultancy. I happen to also be a professional executive coach. And I've been doing this work since 2011. I've been working with women though for a really long time, personally and socially and professionally. But I do think this conversation today is so important because it really starts with ourselves. And I'm actually going through a transition. Our business is changing and evolving, and I'm getting my own accountability on some things. So at every point of our life, we can all evolve, right? And all have the right folks giving us the right feedback and working on ourselves and digging deeper. So I will tell you that this is going to be a great conversation, and we have a lot more control of it than I think we discuss publicly. And so that's why I'm looking forward to us chatting about this, because we want to have your listeners and the folks that are following with what you talk about consistently is really understanding how much control that we have that we don't understand.
Yeah.
It's not just that you don't have a choice, you have to manage it. Some of it is we're not using some of the control we have. But our business works with Fortune 500s, Fortune 100s. We executively coach leaders that are looking for just that one-on-one support. Maybe I'm not doing anything in their actual company. We do programmatic approaches to leadership development, and we always bring in a coaching element to the work we do with our clients. And we are very much supportive, and we really love to advise and engage. And the foundation of our work is self-awareness. That's one of our little unique pieces that I think we bring to the leadership development work we do. So whether it's culture, inclusion, across the board when it comes to having more equitable or having more justice in our environments, we really want to help the leader and the person we serve understand the power they have and how much more control they have in what's happening to them professionally.
That is so good. I mean, that is a whole, Tia. Like, I think so many people feel as if, or they have a belief system as if others are controlling what
Yes.
is happening to them,
Yes.
both in the workplace, and I think it starts long before they get to work, but
Yes.
especially at work, I feel like people feel like they don't have a voice, they don't have a control, and then feeling out of control also kind of lends into this lack of self awareness, right? So
It
even
gets into that. Yes.
yeah. So, I mean, when you're working with your clients, and our show is really it's about leadership, but really through the lens of creating psychologically safe spaces in the
Mm-hmm.
workplace for people, and really what is psychological safety. And it's a big topic. It's more than just a 1 hour workshop, which is why we decided to do and create the Untoxic Boss. But I think part of it is that self awareness, right? This show is rooted and your ability to do two things: realize that you are in control of your circumstances,
Mm-hmm.
and that you have to be aware of how you show up and engage and how people experience you.
Yes. And that is a humbling, that right there is humbling, right? That is a very humbling thing. As I said, I love where you're going with this conversation, because I think if people felt, wow, I have more control than I realize, if some of the people that might have been working longer, like if you're newer to work, you have one perspective. If you're been working for a minute, you have a perspective. If you've been working for 25, 30 years, you have a perspective. And generationally, at every point of that arc, different things were happening in society that affected what was the main conversation or the main focus or what was happening.
Mm.
And right now, we're really in a lot of transition and change, right? Or dare I say VUCA, for those of you that know what that is, that volatility, the uncertainty, the complexity, the ambiguity. They don't talk about it as much as they used to talk about it, but I still think it's very much still happening in the culture, and very
Mhm.
much still happening at work.
Oh
So if
yeah.
you think about understanding what you have control over, how empowering is that? That you don't have to just, some things you can't control, but there's just things that sometimes I don't even think we've considered that we have control over, that we can do some different things.
Yeah, we do. And I think you have to engage in your control early.
Yes.
Early. You have to
Yeah.
engage
Well,
early.
if you have good support, I think that when I came to work, back in the 90s, I didn't really have support. I don't think it was, and I was more on the, selling side of the house of technology.
Mhm.
So I don't think I had as much support. It was more expected that you just do what you're supposed to do, right? It was, you do your job and you do the process and you get your reports in on time. And it was very process based, which is stressful for me. But I will say that I think that with what I know after being in the market and doing this work for as long as I have, people that feel empowered make different choices. And you don't just need leadership and power in the organization to feel empowered. You can really be the individual contributor that can gain power and understanding. What I find is that, and what the research talks about too, is that the more self aware someone is, the better teams work and the better that is. Like I know that, I don't know if my actual team would say this about me. I hope that they would, but I think my self awareness helps us, because I think I can just be a challenge unknowingly in a lot of ways. But
Yeah.
because I'm open to, figuring it out and understanding what that means. Also, I think people's perspective on making mistakes or getting it right, or even conflict, God
Mhm.
forbid. All of those things are really more powerfully understood than negative. And I
Yeah.
think that depending on the culture we work in, different cultures show up in how they expect that to be managed: failure or conflict,
Yeah.
or right,
Yeah.
perfectionism.
I
Um,
agree with you. So I'm gonna. Can I sum this up in my Janine-isms? Well, what Tia just said was self awareness will help you. It will make you see yourself, right, and it makes you be a better leader because it's gonna stop you from acting like a fool. Because we know, right? That's the thing. I tell people I am so self aware. I can't even act up when I want to. Right? I can't.
yeah.
And I do so much work on myself. Not that I'm perfect, but I know, like, when I've done something, and this shows up even in my personal life. I done popped off. I have to go back and be like, babe, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That was me.
Yep.
Right. So I understand that, so I think that's the first thing self awareness does. And I think the other thing, and I just gave an example of it, is self awareness also, as a leader, makes us quick to apologize and identify our own errors. And
Yes.
you're right.
Or
Oh,
be
go
able to
ahead.
accept, or I want to add just a little piece to what you said, or be able to accept when your team is giving you feedback about yourself and conflating intention with actuality. That's a
Yes.
hard one for me, and making sure that I have to step back. I also have to have a few people in my organization or even in my network of friends that support me that are strong enough to say, ma'am, take a minute, hush, like,
Hmm.
right, that have that ability, because everybody doesn't emote the same way. So understanding ourselves really allows us to have the right folks supporting us, allows us to build the right relationships, and that's a beautiful arc into the point that we're talking about today, right? How do you manage politics? How do you deal with certain environments?
Yes.
Well, if you don't know what your things are, some folks don't deal with relationships well, maybe because they haven't had good relationships or they have been hurt in the relationships. That could play a role, because that won't just happen to you personally. It'll affect how
Hmm.
you might maneuver professionally too, potentially. Not saying
Yes.
it will, but potentially.
Yeah.
Um, how are you being? Do you like the process to kind of protect you from having a flow? Do you like to flow too much and you need some process? Like, there's all kind of combinations of understanding who we are, so that
Yeah.
when we're in situations we can see ourselves, or have someone wake us up if we're not seeing ourselves, because
Exactly.
intention doesn't change the fact that you're still making the mistake or doing the thing that's still happening, and not
Mhm.
pushing those together.
Yeah. You're
They
exactly right.
separate
Oh,
things.
this is good. This is so
Okay.
good. Always good. That's why I tell y'all we have some very amazing guests that come on the Untoxic Boss that both, and they share both their learned experiences in their profession, but it's those lived experiences. It's those
And
places where we are vulnerable and the mistakes that we've made. I think that makes this show so rich for our listeners, and why we get these amazing emails and reviews about, right, how this has impacted them as leaders, and how and it has impacted them personally. So as we transition a little bit, right, we're going to just kind of leverage this self-awareness conversation into talking about how do we navigate uh, office landmines and politics. So first, tell us, Tia, what is office politics?
so I'll give it two different sides, right? I think office politics really deal with it, can be different depending on where you work, right? And really, leadership plays a role in it, and then historical arc of the culture of the company plays a role in it, right? So if we've always done it a certain way and everybody knows the unstated rules, that can play into politics if you think about it, right? Because if you don't know the unstated rule and you come in and you're doing the rule that everybody knows you're not supposed to do, but it's not written anywhere, that can affect you politically. But also, how to maneuver and interact with people, I think, to me, is the biggest thing people talk to me about in terms of office politics. But I think there's a lot of layers of people that are way more versed in office politics, like how you define it, than I would be. But I would say those are the ones that I get the most conversation about in my work: the unsaid rules that affect the political landscape of the organization, right? That everybody knows, or people that have been there long enough know, and how to manage relationships and who's who and what's what and who's the person that you do or don't do the thing with,
Yeah, that
right?
is,
So those
yeah.
are the two that I get the most. But like I said, I'm sure there are people out there that know a lot more levels of complexity to that. But those two, I think, and those are the two that you do have access to control and engage with more than the other depth of points.
Yeah, and I think the way you described it, and defined it, is perfect. And it leads to why I always tell my clients and anybody, this is why you cannot be a narrow focused, head down, get my work done employee with expectations to move up in the organization.
Not anymore. I think it probably was a little more prevalent in the 20th century, when your job and your skill and your process served you. Things had to get done a certain way, and they needed people to do those skills over and over. Operationally based behavior heavily. I do think that today, we're a quarter of the century. We are a quarter of the way through the 21st century,
Hmm.
and that's a fourth. right? Think about that, right? Next year we'll be right at, 25 years into the 21st century. I know, can you believe it? I was actually married when the 21st century began. So, oh my gosh, right? So I've been, so I got a little age on me. But I will say that understanding that, though, I think is super important. So, how do you know what the new rules are? But the rules for the future of working is very heavily based in human only traits: relationships, ideation, innovative thinking, strategy, proactivity, empathy, consideration of other people, creating community. Those really have a lot of weight. I feel like, especially at the leadership level, doing your job is, like we say, table stakes, right? You should know how to do your job. And so, what are all these other things that only humans can do?
Yeah.
How good you are at that really will serve you. Being very, like you say, narrowly focused, like you said, and just being to do the job person, that can hurt you depending on what your responsibilities are.
Yeah, it's definitely gonna hurt, especially if you're looking to move around and you don't know how to effectively communicate
Mm-hmm.
both both the work and all those other things you described. Right, to be a more inclusive leader means that even in my communication style and how I communicate, even frustration,
Mm-hmm.
conflict, complexity of the work, leadership, how I influence others, all of that is also wrapped into the office politics because we're constantly evaluating you as an employee, as a leader, and that gets really political in the
It
workplace.
does. And also believing that things are the way you see it, you proverbially see it, right? That's another thing that I think can be challenging for folks, is that you don't think it's a problem. And why would someone do that? I don't understand what's going on. I would not do it that way. This is
Mhm.
ridiculous. Why are this, right? And that can really limit you, because you have to really step back and say, we're not talking about abuse. We're not talking about inappropriate things. We're not talking about that. We're talking about everything being functional and appropriate, to some degree.
Yeah.
How do you understand what the business imperative is? How do you understand what we're focused for? And then can you look in your own mirror, which I think can be challenging, because trust me, like I said, I never present myself like I've got it all handled, because I do not. Okay. I do not. But I will say, understanding, is that me? Because that's my stuff. You know what? I was given this thing and I kind of debated a little bit when it was said to me, but let me step back and go, like you said, go back to this person and be like, hey, let me tell you what I understand now. I had to think about what you were saying to me. It still might have been a little conflict in the beginning, but how do you come back and try to fix that, right?
Yeah.
And really think through how you're seeing it.
Mhm.
So the closer you can get to sitting in the pocket of objectivity, let me be objective here. Even though my opinion is I like blue, they're going in the direction of green. And I don't like green, but this has to be done and this has to be done and this has, right. But if you can if you can sit more objectively, you can accept that it's green even though you don't like it.
Yeah.
And
Right.
accepting it's green doesn't mean you love green. It just means for the business imperative, we're going to go toward green, right? And I
Right.
think
And that building consensus is such a big part of that. And when you have fractions in your organization, right? These little groups and what I call little cults and people undermining the work. And where I see this the most, and you tell me where you if you've seen it and how you see how it shows up with your clients. But where I see it the most is very large organizations through acquisition. So if there's an acquisition, and I've been in these situations where
yeah,
a company has merged or acquired another company, very similar lines of business. There wasn't a large like leaning down on the staff. So no layoffs happened, right? And so
yeah,
you're trying to fit all these people together, or people are bouncing around in different organizations. But we have our people, right? And people that we are going to talk to, people, and when leaders start to become part of the gossip and the bad behavior in the workplace because of familiarity and friendship and relationship.
oh yes,
Um, and that's office politics, right? That is
absolutely.
part of it. That what I call that high school playground behavior that makes its way into a professional setting, and you have all of these cliques around the organization, and people are undermining the work, even through complaining.
Absolutely.
It's a political game that they're playing with an intent to undermine someone in the workplace.
And then what do you do too when telling a leader a problem looks like complaining to that leader, but you're really not? So it's so many layers to the human dynamic. What you just discussed is pure human behavior. It's all human. A computer can't fix that. A process cannot fix that, right? Because culture is going to trump it every time. Whatever the culture of your environment is going to supersede whatever processes that you put in
Whatever
place.
that
It's
is.
gonna
Yeah.
still, it's like the weeds growing through the concrete, right? It's gonna still come through. And I feel like the only thing that I've ever seen, and I've only ever been told on the back end too, with people that we work with, that helps them feel better, maneuver better, and engage better, grow and stretch, is understanding themselves more.
Yeah.
Right?
Definitely.
Because you can't change the playground politics necessarily, but you can get to know the person on the playground that's in charge, that is running the slide, and the person that's over here with the merry-go-round. If you want to get on the merry-go-round, that's your desire, you may have to ask, figure out how to have a relationship with that person.
Yeah.
But if your stuff is, I don't run people down, I'm not begging anybody for anything, and you conflate that with trying to get an opportunity, right? So if your job is to get on the merry-go-round, but there's a situation happening, and you look at it as, well, I'm not going to beg them, I'm not going to try to make them, I don't do that. That's a limiter. But if you can get into the pocket of objectivity and say, okay, I've got these 4 things that are due in this person. How do I engage them without selling my soul or falling over myself or seeming like I'm, begging them, or, how do I find a path to that? Because that's where you're finding the balance in yourself. How we see things affects how we're acting in situations.
Yeah.
I'd also add, because this is one of my limiters, being so free and comfortable.
Like, say more. What is that? Say a little bit more about that.
So when I feel good and I feel comfortable and I feel like everybody's on the same page, I'm just doing it. I'm talking and saying all the things. And more than once or twice in my life, in certain situations, I have offended someone or affected someone. Now, I do believe that my intention wasn't to do that, but I wasn't fully present in that either. Right. And so when you're fully present, you can see all the things. You're not, I'm not saying you got to be on guard or walk on eggshells. What I'm offering is being really present to, what is my role here? How is that going to be perceived? Who are the players in the room? Right? Are they entry level people and management level people? How am I being? And I find that whenever I get too comfortable, good or bad, right, and anything in between that, then I'm making the mistake because I'm not fully present. When I'm fully present, I do a much better job of seeing potential pitfalls or challenges or someone I might want to talk to in a different way or see in a different way. And I think managing politics is more being in control of what's happening, not looking for the rule to protect you, but what is the relational engagement I'm going to give with you, Jeannine, to engage there. I think it's more human-based with how we manage office politics. I know that sounds like it makes perfect sense, but I think that sometimes people are looking for rules and processes to protect them from office politics. And you need the structure of the organization, rules and regulations of what's right. But I find that the things that are happening are very subtle. Like you talked about, well, let's talk about scapegoating, right? This one person has a problem, and then this person has a problem. Oh yeah, they did that to me too. And those people have power or they have access. And then the person that's outed, they feel the weirdness. But how do you go tell HR? Well, they just weren't talking to me.
Yeah.
How do you communicate? Well, they weren't being nice to me. As an adult, that's a hard thing I get that conversation, believe it or not, more often than you think.
Yeah.
So how do you manage that? So when I'm working with clients, I do discuss all the subtle things that play a role in toxic environments or uninclusive environments, lacking psychological safety. There's so many pieces to that that really do affect it. And I find it's more with the behavior of the human beings in the mix and their lack of awareness of what they're doing, their lack of clarity about how they're being experienced, or just the culture of the organization. We don't talk about those things. We don't show emotion, or we don't interrupt people when they're like this. All the rules you have to kind of know. I know. I hope we're
Yeah, and I think, our workforce is changing so much that there is this expectation around that impacts office politics is this social emotional intelligence that this new incoming workforce is expecting their leaders to demonstrate. Right? So they're expecting their leaders to have a high sense of self awareness, empathy, and not just beyond emotional intelligence. It's you need to care for me as a human being. And I don't know, when you started talking about the generations yesterday, I worked with a leadership team, and it was so heavy, but it
mm,
was good. It was good heavy. Like, it
I
was
love
so
that.
interesting because we were talking about psychological safety, but a lot of what we were talking about was office politics, and it was culture, but it was also social emotional requirements that leaders are expected to have. And I remember the most senior leader in the room says, sometimes I don't feel psychologically safe because of all the complaints. We're doing everything they asked us to do, and then you still have people complaining and creating, like, they're scapegoating, they're
Yep.
gaslighting,
Yep.
they're doing all of these things, they're blaming, they're like, oh, we wanted this, but do we have to do it all day? It's like all of these things. And I think what people think is office politics happens here, right? So on the 14th and 15th floor of the organization, but office politics starts down on the main level in the lobby, and all of these things are going on in the organizations. What have you seen around that?
Okay. So I'll give you a quick thing that came in my mind, and I'll try not to talk in. Sometimes my team is like, "Yeah, you're just talking in circles," and it
That's
feels
okay. Hey, this is our show. We
yeah, that's right. We're doing it right.
we do.
So what is happening at the entry point when you walk into the lobby, so to speak, like you said, it depends on how many years of tenure does everybody have. Because I think office politics, when someone knows all the history and all the arc and all the folks that have been in and out, and they know what the requirements are and how to keep their job and how it goes, that can affect politics of the office. What leaders do and don't say can affect the politics of the office.
Yeah.
What I find, if there's a lot of hierarchy, then, like, what I mean by that is every company has to have some hierarchy in it. I get it. Who's the leader? I get that. But when there's, oh, we don't do it like that. Oh, you don't speak to them. Like, no, you just can't get it on their calendar. Oh, right. And I think if we take it back, so see, that's what I've seen, like in companies where there's this old way that we've done it, and certain people are allowed to be spoken to and not be spoken to. And when this person's in the way, we act the way. And I've watched it. I've watched the culture of environments be very political, where the leader walks in, everybody's like, oh my God, it's the leader. And they're honoring the leader, and they're, oh, and that's a part of the culture too. So then what happens if you or I walk up to the leader, being like, hey, I love those shoes, so let's walk down the hall together. And everybody's like, oh my God, they're talking. I've seen that, right? But I've also seen it where the leaders are just amazing, and they're open, and they're engaging, and they're communicative, and they're talkative. So all of those things. But I do believe understanding proximity and understanding intersectionality and all the ways that those things manifest how someone does or doesn't get interacted with affects that. So if you
Yeah.
think about what you said about when you come in, it is politics down there too. I find that if it's a whole bunch of new people that don't know anything about the company, or they're just brand new to work, you're going to get a different set of type of politics.
Yeah.
Maybe it's more cliquish. Maybe it's more, here we do lunch this week, right? But I think when you have more mature people that might be at that entry point of the business, that have more history, there's a different type of politics.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Or a different type of expectation. So I do think the combination of the kind of folks that are interacting play a role in it. I do think that companies can help with this. But to go back to your point around the generation, the digital natives, or the Z's, they do have an expectation of how you treat them, how you emote with them. And I have found, especially in our group, that our digital natives that work with us, they have an expectation, but it's a fair expectation that they're understood, and they'll come to the line to have that really rich conversation with you. Yeah. And I think when you've been conditioned in a certain way for 30 years in corporate America, depending on your own intersectionality and your own proximity to leadership and your history of your job, it might affect how you respond to that
Yeah.
expectation.
So when we're talking about these landmines, what are some landmines that we haven't discussed, or toxic, or even just workplace office politics that people should be aware of? What should they be looking for?
So I'm going to stay in the neighborhood of where I live mostly. I'm just going to stay in that neighborhood. And what
Okay.
I'd offer is we've kind of talked about it indirectly, but really and truly the landmine of our own belief system. Now, I'm not talking about I'm not talking about the type of self awareness we discussed earlier, which is like knowing how you're experiencing all that stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
I think that we know what someone else's landmine is to us. They did this, they didn't do that. I couldn't do this. Right? But what about our own belief systems that limit our ability to maneuver in certain environments?
Okay.
Right. So, have you ever asked a client this question? I've asked it a few times, well, more than a few times. Do you hear someone tell you no, or do you assume the answer is no?
Yeah.
And when you watch someone respond to that, that's a landmine for them, if you think
Okay.
about it, right? Because if you're assuming, no, I can't do that, and you're upset about your employee, you're not happy with what you're doing, but in your own mind, you've assumed I can't do these things or I'm not allowed to do that, but no one told you that, that is a version of a landmine to me, right? So that's what I'm saying. I want to stick with how the self awareness piece, right? Also, if
Mm-hmm.
you assume that if someone talks to you a certain way, whether that's passively, non-vocally, or
But
verbally,
in your own mind, you
that right, either one of those, that can also play a role as being. So I do think that sometimes the landmines that we have are not just those traditional ones that we think that are outside of how someone treats you. People aren't open to engaging with you, or you're not giving clear directive of what to do. You're expected to figure those things out. Those can turn into landmines
yeah.
of sorts. But I find the ones that we may be doing on our own way can really be a limiter. And I talk about those more with my clients because of our subject matter than and then how to think about what that means for other things. But I do think that really, really, oh, and also I think another landmine is not taking time to understand an environment first when you get there, especially when you're new. You don't take time to just, let's get the lay of the land. Let me understand who the players are. Let me understand what the expectations are.
Mm-hmm.
I think that could be a limiter. Now, if that's the kind of landmines you're talking about, but it might be another
No,
version.
no. Hey, this is perfect. I mean, we so for those of you who are listening to us on Spotify or other places where you get your podcasts, we got some folks in our chat window that are agreeing. Right, they spent a lot of time living in the know. Melissa, she added that here in the chat, and so I think those are very important things. I think I would add two things to that just for today's discussion because we know the list could be very very long. But I want to add expectations, right? Having
Mhm.
these unspoken expectations of others, that you think how you think things are supposed to go down, or expecting people to engage with you in a certain way. And then I think the other thing is not really, and you kind of touched on this, but I want to add the word power,
Mhm.
understanding where the social power and the where it is in the organization, and to be aware that you should not, how should I say this, that you don't have to be on one person's team to be successful in an organization. I think sometimes people feel like, oh, they seem to be the powerful one
Yeah.
and the one that holds the power. I'm going to make sure I get close to them. And but what happens when that person leaves the organization and you've alienated other leaders and other people in the organization?
And how many times have you seen that, Jeannine? I've seen it so many times where
Too
you
many.
got the person with the most power, loves you, values you, they're your sponsor. Forget mentor, they're your actual sponsor. They've got your back. Maybe I've even heard where that person that has the power has said, thou shalt not touch this person, so to speak, said or unsaid. And then that person retires or leaves or gets another opportunity. And then you're really a sitting duck, right? Because all
Yeah.
the folks that you stepped on or indirectly didn't engage or didn't work well with, now
Hmm.
you have no support. And I think that can really hurt you when you don't have good relationships outside of your team. Something we
Yeah.
do talk about with our clients is that, how are your relationships in the with what you do? How are your relationships in other organizations? And also, I think another landmine is to go back to the self is not understanding what's going on in the world and how that correlates to your job if you're a leader.
Ooh,
You're
what?
a leader of leaders, you're leading people that lead people. You're going into leadership, want to be in leadership, you don't understand what's happening in the actual world, right? And I'm not saying you have to read every article and know every single thing, but do you know that Ukraine and Russia are having a war? Do you understand that something is happening in Israel? That's why all the kids might be camping out in colleges for the Palestinians. Like, do you know what's happening in the world? That the DNC just happened, and a few months, last month it was the RNC. All of those things are simple things that you can just have a subtle awareness of, in a basic way. Do you know who some of the world leaders are? That can help you, right? To have more conversations at work. Sometimes the landmine is being tested. You're being asked about certain things to see if you do know what's going on, right? And you could miss that too when you're not as aware of what's happening in the world. Yeah. And I also think understanding how the job you do affects the business bottom line, like why I do the job I do affects this. So just a little bit more intellectual understanding about how you're maneuvering. I believe things people that can. I believe discussing things that people can control is a more empowering way to support them than discussing things that you cannot do anything necessarily about in an immediate way. But self-directed behavior, self-understanding, it's really the best gift you can give yourself. I say this all the time. It's the best gift, because even if things are not going well in your life, they probably could be going worse if you didn't know yourself. You know what I mean? Like, there's some things I really could have messed up, Jeannine. I still messed up a few things. I have done that, but it's not as bad as it could have been.
Right.
But for me, understanding myself, or having that right network, or people that are empowered to tell me the hard truth.
Yes.
Not what I want to hear, not what I, really tell the truth.
And those are the type of mentors, allies, and sponsors that people need to cultivate, both in their personal lives, but definitely in the workplace. I think even in a remote work environment, we still have office politics. And I tell people all the time, unless there is a grace and we say, hey, you're not going to be like that, we give you the grace not to be on screen. Let's say it that way.
Okay, let's talk about
our companies say that. But office politics around being on screen, if your more senior leaders on screen, in my opinion, you probably should be on screen.
Yes.
So, right. I think people, even in a remote work environment, there's something about visibility that demonstrates presence. I'm working with a small team, and I'm not saying this is right or wrong, but body language can be very political. And one of the comments that a leader made was, well, I'm not sure if she's even really engaged, if she likes her job. And she just went on and on with a list of things. And I'm, as the coach, managing the conversation for the whole team. I'm wondering, well, did you ask her?
Correct. Did you assume the answer?
But there's a perception that whatever they saw or did not see on screen, so if she wasn't visible on screen, right, her camera was off, or if her camera was on and she appeared to be leaning back or looking away or something, that the leader thought that this person wasn't engaged and concluded something. I'm not saying it's right or wrong.
Well, here's the thing that's so deep about that is that human communication is, what do they say, 90+% nonverbal.
Yes.
So when your verbal behavior and your body language doesn't correlate, the human goes to the body language and the nonverbal first.
They definitely go there. And that's an office politics. So even in a remote environment, I try to encourage companies to be honest about it. Right? Be honest if you're evaluating. If we've had 6 meetings this month and Jeannine hasn't been on screen for 0 meetings, what is the perception of that? Right? Don't pretend as if, oh, it's okay, but really it comes out in my performance evaluation as she doesn't seem to be very engaged.
And that's a new thing. That's an outgrowth of COVID, right? Because now it's all camera, camera, camera. And when you're going into work, you are prepared to be seen by everybody.
Exactly.
And when you're working from home, you might, you have more time because you're not driving into the office maybe, or dropping your children off maybe, or, you're not dealing with that thing of having to be fully pulled together.
But you're at home working. You're going into the office as soon as you click that link for Teams, Zoom, or whatever. And I think, and I'm not, and I get it. There are days where I would love to not be on camera. But every Zoom meeting that is held on my calendar, I have to show up. I'm on I'm on calendar. I may not have on my favorite color green. I might have on a t-shirt. It could be a WNBA t-shirt. It might be an Alabama State t-shirt or a polo, but I'm present. And I think that gives my clients, that gives our team that work for us a sense of Jeannine is here. And I'm bringing it up because it is part of the politics of work. Now,
Yeah.
how does this become toxic? Let's show people. Tia, are there any actionable steps that you would give to employees to help them navigate, when these politics start to get a little toxic in the work environment? What can they do to kind of maintain their mental well-being?
I think definitely having someone that can give you feedback that is meaningful and that's trustworthy. And let me tell you what I mean by that. There's one thing to have the person that is your friend and you all think somewhat the same. That may not be the best person to give you the objectivity. But I do think looking for people that you can really trust that can give you advice, and people outside of your work environment, like how you just had this conversation about being on camera, that might not be something you have to get from your colleagues. You can get that from someone maybe that's outside of your work environment. But I think that that's one of the biggest things I find is that if you don't know what you don't know, and someone doesn't tell you that you're failing,
Mm-hmm.
that's a bad combination, right? Like
Yeah.
that's just going to affect you. But if you decide, I want to be aware, I want to look at other people's behavior, what is everybody else doing? Like you said, if the leader is on, I probably want to be on camera. Even if no one else is on but me and the leader, I want to be on camera, right? Um, I think there's just a lack of awareness. And I think there's an automatic, people being on automatic, just going through the motions, not being present, not thinking about it. So I think getting feedback is really, really important. Now, I've also been told, and I'd love to know what you think about this, Jeannine, when people say, well, I've asked, and they say I'm doing great. I've asked, and they told me, yes, everything's fine. So then how do you really get the right thing when you don't have the access internally for them to tell you the truth? Right? Because usually what I was told, and I don't know if you've heard this too, you probably have, where they had an inkling something was wrong by the way folks were acting weird around them. But when they kept asking, hey, how is it going? And they keep saying, oh, no, you're fine. Right? How does that work for them? I think that's a version of a landmine too, right? Not having really good feedback. So I think that you really have to be considerate of what you can control, which is feedback, engagement, having the right folks giving you advice, having more relationships than just maybe specifically your team, understanding the difference between sponsorship and mentorship. How many co-conspirators do you have that support you? How many accomplices do you have that support you? I know that's a whole conversation for a whole different time. I know we get to the end of this conversation, but I think that all of those things are important. But I think if you start with in the healthiest way, what can I control? It will help you see and manage landmines a lot better than if you just depend on the environment to give it to you. Yeah. Or people to follow the rules and do what you think they should be doing, you proverbially think that they should be doing. And understanding that, do you want to evolve, or do you need it to be black and white, clear cut, so I know what the rules and regulations are? Also understanding, if I'm going off left, let me know, Jeannine, because this might be too far to the other side. Does the behavior that you you do a lot of behavior that gives you support, or is it a crutch? Right. And I give you a context about that. Sometimes I see people in situations where they're using behaviors as a crutch. Right. You got to be super prepared for every meeting. And if I'm not prepared for every meeting, then I can't show up. That's more of a crutch than it is a support. Because the one time you can't be prepared, do you fall apart? Well, then you kind of know that some of the things you're doing might be more crutches for you than supportive for you. That's a hypothetical example. I know that's not, please don't. I hope nobody gets upset about that, but I'm not saying it as 100%. I'm just saying, think about it for yourselves if that resonates with you, right? And challenging yourself there. Things have to be a certain way in the meeting. Having agendas that have to be just to every letter. And if we miss one subject and we can't finish, like little things that people do that they have to be a certain way for them to function effectively. I think those things can be smaller landmines, but they can feed into a bigger problem of not being able to be more fluid and create environments where someone that needs to be fluid can operate, someone that needs to be organized can operate, someone that needs to ask a lot of questions feels seen and valued, someone that needs it to be more process-based feels seen and valued. That's a kind of a deal. So I think it kind of took us a little bit off, but I think all of the ways that we see the world all of the ways that we as individuals operate and expect things to be can help and or hurt us depending on our position on that.
Yeah.
I feel like
I think that was spot on. So as we kind of wrap this conversation a little, we've gone way over, but it's so good. So, and I don't mind going over because, like I say, this is my show.
okay, do your thing, Jeannine. I got time. I got time.
I just want you to help people here. So here I am. I'm your client, Tia, and I'm coming to you and I'm saying, I think I'm caught in a little office politics.
Mm.
I don't know how I got here, but my name is coming up in conversations saying I said stuff that I really didn't say. This, I feel like I'm caught in the middle between a couple of leaders in my organization. Um, what should I do? If you
Mm.
find that you're kind of caught in the middle of some office politics and you've hit a landmine or two, can we recover from it? And then what should we do and how can we recover?
So if you brought that to me and we were, and I was talking about it, I'd start asking you questions. So the first question I'd ask you is, why do you feel like you're caught between two leaders?
Because it's gotten back to me
Mm-hmm.
that I said some things that I didn't, and I think one of the leaders is upset with me, and I just feel like my name is coming up, and I don't know how this happened, but I really, so I feel like I'm caught in the middle.
So I would say, okay, so you not knowing how it happened, let's work on that first, Jeannine, because if you don't know how it happened, it's going to be hard for me to give you the directive and support you need. So let's work on me talking to you to help you go back, and let's try to build that path to figure out why it might have happened, so we have a little bit more information to pull from, right?
Yeah.
Also, I'd like you to think about, Jeannine, who is the person that brought you the data? Do you trust them? Why did they tell you? What was the context of the point? So you see, I'm gonna start getting you to start thinking about all the things. So if you say you don't know something, I'm gonna challenge and support you to think about why you don't know the answer. Do you not know the answer because there is no answer? Do you not know the answer because maybe you don't want to touch it? So we can figure that out. So that's one thing. And then I also want to know who brought you back the information. And what's your relationship with that person? Not because it's right or wrong. It could be really a support to you. But having you think about that starts having, even if you don't express it to me, you start having your, okay. Right. You have your own internal ahas, because I think when people don't know an answer to something, that's always a place where I lean in.
Yeah.
Let's figure out why you don't know that answer. If you feel like, I didn't do anything to deserve this, trust me, that's a slippery slope, right? We want to lean in on that, because I think that you have to deal with what you can control.
Yeah.
You just have to. So to understand how you're in political situations. Also, before I finish that point, and I might forget that point, but I know we're almost at the end. Why don't you, is this a pattern in your life? So sometimes I'm giving feedback. I got some feedback just this week, and I was told something that other people have said to me before. So as soon as I heard the information, I was like, oh, you know what? I've been told that before. So this person who doesn't know those people is giving me the same. So that's what I'm saying about, I support folks to really think about themselves, so we can talk about, why don't you know the answer? Have you ever heard this feedback before? So if they don't really know how they're getting in situations that are difficult, and sometimes it could just really be that you're being wronged. That could also be true. But if we can talk through what really is happening for you, then we can, as the young folks say, suss that out. But I know I don't want to look old, trying to say hip stuff, girl, and look old, but you know what I mean? So we can try to figure out for you why you might be in the situation you're in, even if there may not be a specific answer in the moment, or you might have to go back and do more interaction. But I find being fully present, being very open, even if there's a little conflict in the process, being okay with that, making sure you allowed yourself to have people in your circle that you trust. So whether they give you information inside your organization or outside your organization from wisdom and knowledge, really be supportive.
That is so good. One of the things I learned early in my career was the not to build just singular alliances. But what I did not learn, what took me some time to learn, was how to manage multiple relationships and alliances, right? So, and what I'm saying, and I'll just make it plain. I knew that I could not just be aligned to one leader in my organization and only worked for them. And I worked in consulting, and I've always worked in organizations where it was very kind of like a matrix
Matrix.
organization where
Mm-hmm.
you would be, working on projects with multiple leaders across different clients and
Yeah.
teams.
Yeah.
And what I learned is that I could not just have my alliance or allegiance to one leader, but I also what took me some time to learn is how to manage being likable and friendly with a lot of different people. Because what I found is because I had a ability to have relationships with all sorts of people, I was sitting in a lot of rooms, and some of those rooms I should not have been in. And this is where the office politics got me.
And you
I
mean you
got
should not have been in as in, but for your relationship is how you
Yeah,
got
but for my
invited to the
relationship or
that
my
you were.
work relationship, or I sat too long when the conversation started to go in the wrong direction. And what happened to me
Mm,
is
I
kind
like
of one of those situations where it got back that I agreed with a particular point of view about something and someone that I never even said anything about, but I was sitting in the room
it. And
when the conversation was happening.
so instead of you excusing yourself, which takes also a level of a certain type of presence to
Yes,
say, hey guys, I got another meeting, got to go. Great talking with y'all. Talk with you
but
later.
I got to get up out of here.
Yeah, yes. You know the situation, but yeah,
I
that's a really, that is very nuanced, and that's next level right there, because that is really, depending on how, yeah, that's powerful, powerful.
Yeah, and that's so I ran into a landmine. I got pulled into some office politics. I had to recover, and I had to speak up like I never said that in front of the person who I knew shared that I said it. Right? I knew how it had. I had started to think about like I didn't say nothing, but I was there. And part of that office politics is how do you build relationships with all of these different people, um, and want to work with them, have them as allies, supporters, co-conspirators, all of these things, but still making sure that when someone is communicating on your behalf, that they are telling your truth. So what do you have to do is make sure no one is communicating for you and that you are always the voice and the messenger of what you believe, what you think about a particular situation in the workplace, and you're managing those relationships. I think because we started this conversation talking about how politics is aligned with relationship and self-awareness.
That's
And
right.
that example that I lived, I was very young in my career. I was about 27, very young in my career, but I learned very early on that you have to be able to, you have to control how you're perceived in the workplace, your own professional brand, and you have to be the messenger for yourself. You have to speak up for yourself. And
You
so
do.
understanding all of that is a big part of this. Tia, this has been an amazing conversation. I hope those of you who joined in today and who are listening on our podcast really got some information that you can use, and that you can use in your work life to help you manage and navigate workplace landmines and politics. Because our biggest concern for you on this particular show is that you don't get caught up in things that you didn't even see it coming. You're ill equipped to manage your relationships, and that you don't see how you play a part in the things that happen to you in the workplace, because you have a lot more control than you think you do. Tia, tell everyone how they can connect with you and how they can work with you.
Yeah, well, the name of our company is Notre International. It's just the word, like Notre Dame, Notre, the word international with an e at the end. A .com. They can also go to my LinkedIn page, which is it's not my nickname, but if you just put my nickname in, Tia Buckham White, you can research us there. You can also, you can, once you get to my LinkedIn page, if you just message me, I'm happy to follow up. I also, we also, like I said, our website, LinkedIn, and I think that that's going to be the quickest way for anyone to access us. And I've also had to, you can also find all of our data on there and send us any information. But I would love to talk with anybody about that. And Jeannine, if there's anything we can ever do, please let me know. This has been a great conversation. I really, really appreciate you inviting me on today.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And we also put Tia's information in the show notes, and you will also see it here in the LinkedIn and Facebook live chat. So you can also get in touch with her here. We are so happy, Tia. I know we're going to be working on some things together. We're going to
Yes.
help leaders continue to elevate, right,
Yes.
their
Yes.
lives and their careers here in the workplace. Thank you
Yes.
all for joining the Untoxic Boss. Again, I am Jeannine K. Brown, your host, and feel free to connect with us. We have articles in the chat around psychological safety that you can read, and you can also reach us on our website at everydaylead.com. Thank you again, Tia, for being with us. Thank you, everyone.
All right.